Let's begin. My name is Sean Waterman. I'm a reporter for the Washington Times, based in Washington, D.C., and I am here to moderate this debate between the CISOs and the hackers. So the first thing I want to say is no holding, no headbutting, no hitting below the belt. Okay?
Throw glasses.
No, but seriously, the other thing I want to say is, I want this as far as possible to be a conversation. So, it's not polite to interrupt, but don't stand on ceremony, and certainly don't wait for me if you want to chip in. So I'm not going to give any long introductions, so I'll be very brief, and I want to start by saying that no one here, and that includes me, is speaking on behalf of their employer. So to start on my left with the CISOs, we have Erin Owens, who is the CISO for a large healthcare organization. Next to him is Jerry Chapey, Lieutenant Colonel Jerry Chapey, who now works for a large insurance provider, but also has continuing responsibilities in the reserve for a large military organization, which he previously was deputy CISO of. Next to him is Karthik Swanam, who works for a large financial institution. Eric Svetkov works for Mead Analytics, a cloud services provider, and Amar Singh works for a large global corporation. On the opposing team, in the red corner, we begin with at the far end, Christopher Ellisan, who works for RSA Net Witness. Next to him, Jonathan Cran, who works for Pawnee Express. Jack Daniel works for Tenable Security. And Mr. Bodmer is currently, he tells me, between employers.
I got my resignation letter on Friday.
I want to start, if I may, with a really big question, okay? No one's really in charge of the internet. I mean, ICANN doles out domain names, the IEEE sets standards, but there isn't really anyone in charge. Does that need to change? Does internet governance need to be reviewed? And as most of you probably know, there is an effort now afoot to get the International Telecommunications Union to take that kind of a role. Can I start with the hackers? Would any of you care to address that?
The internet getting regulated?
My answer to that is no.
So my answer to that is a simple no.
Could you say why?
Sorry?
Could you say why?
Yeah, because one thing, the internet is the last frontier. It's a good source of information. Now, if you censor anything in the internet, you're not only cutting the information flow from one person to another, but also whatever freedom we have left in this world. Like going around different countries, aside from the US, there's lots of censorship going on already. And usually those countries with censorship, when it comes to progress, their progress is really slow because the flow of information is just not there. So if somebody would ask me whether I would want to censor the internet or anything in that matter, my answer is always no.
Is it necessarily a matter of censorship, though? Would any of our CISOs like to chip in? I mean, shouldn't there be some accountability? Shouldn't there be someone who actually has the power, for example, to knock dodgy domains offline?
I think what we're seeing is, and we talk about this a lot in kind of our government forums and others, is as long as the activity persists the way it's going today, not necessarily with the guys on this side of the table, but with real hackers, then what's going to happen is we're going to end up having governance. The idea is financial services systems getting bombarded by Iran and other things that have happened in the last few weeks. and then not just nation states, but people, activists that are out there, there's going to be a point where a global corporation or a national corporation of certain sizes will have to have a device on its network to do attribution against coordinated attacks. That's what's happening. That's the direction it's going, unless us as CISOs can get better at securing our individual organizations. And so it's incumbent upon us in the private sector to either take ownership of that and get better at it, or that's probably the more likely direction that we'll end up going. You guys have more, I'm sure.
So I think the law of unintended consequences will come into effect here. If we pass laws and attempt to regulate the internet, what will end up happening is a number of unintended things will occur. Censorship will occur, which would violate the First Amendment in the United States. And frankly, I think that's what protects a lot of us. Free media, the ability to have an exchange of ideas, not regulated by government, is important. And we should just do our jobs better and get on with business.
Anyone? No? Jack?
I'm going to echo that. The internet works because there are a lot of pieces to it, and its complexity is actually its strength, and it is difficult to manage. But we're talking about putting technical controls in the hands of people that don't quite understand things. I mean, a series of tubes is a famous quote for a reason. And the folks that are making these laws now are proposing these things. And if we put them in the hands of international bodies, let's be politically correct for once in my life. So the United Nations has served some real value in its history, and it has also done some really dumb stuff. And some of the really dumb stuff is when it's been given authority to things outside of its initial charter, like regulation. And it takes years for people to agree on terminology. It takes years for people, and they tend to be left behind by the reality of the world around us. The internet is that way. And there's another factor that we have to factor in: who owns and who manages the internet. And I'll be blunt, as it stands currently commercially, the ITU or US Congress can do whatever they want. A quarter to a third of the traffic touches Akamai on any given day. If they don't agree with the rules or decide not to be a US company, they own that. It doesn't matter. It's a case of they just don't understand what it would take to manage this. It's a political answer. It is a simplistic answer to a complex problem.
Come on.
I think the anonymity bit of the internet will become a bigger headache later on, apart from the regulatory bit, where I still believe in the free fundamental flow of information, kind of agreeing with the other side, which is interesting. But the anonymity, once we move on from IPv4 and we move on to the billions of other IP addresses that everyone will have, anonymity may become a bigger concern rather than regulatory. And I agree with the rest of the other concerns, but I'm just thought about, will anyone ever be anonymous when everyone gets an individual IP identity? That may become a question that we all talk about later on.
Well, that is one of the things, isn't it, that makes the internet such a wonderful playground for criminals and spies is the anonymity. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that we can do about that? I mean, will IPv6 change that? What about the National Strategy for Trusted Identities in Cyberspace, which was rolled out last year with great fanfare by the White House? Sean?
Yeah, so, Jack said it, plain as day just a few moments ago, and look at gun control, and that's a great, when you look at it, how well has that worked, right? You still have, tons of illegal arms being sold left and right, but it's a great play. But ask the citizens of China, ask the citizens of Iran how well censorship is working for them. Now, when it comes to identities, okay, so we get a driver's license to walk around and plug into the internet. that's the next target. I mean, there's no way, I mean, there'll be illegal black market sales of identities left and right. I mean, how are you ever really going to, constrain, you need a, specific ID to get onto the internet? It's impossible. Look at all the countries around the world, these, third world countries that are, growing their technology base. There's no way to control that. And it sounds great, in a boardroom of CISOs thinking about the next steps, but it's never going to happen. It's something you cannot control. And I can think of 10 different things or more I can do to bypass any of that. So, yeah.
I don't personally disagree at all. I think that you're absolutely right. Unique identities are not unique once they're on the internet. People can impersonate people. They can impersonate computer systems. They can go through anonymous proxies. This is not going to be unique identity for everyone in the world.
But that's because the architecture, and I mean, I should point out, I don't have a technical background, but the architecture of the internet was built to be as open as possible. But we're now in a position where it's absolutely vital, not just to people's daily lives, but to global commerce and national security. Do we need to change the fundamental architecture of the internet so that there is some accountability, so that people can be, somehow joined to the things that they do online?
I'm not going to say yes. I think that's a resounding no. Yeah, that's my feeling. Others may have different opinions.
I definitely think that it does not need to be regulated. Like the gentleman over here said, that any regulations that we do have seems to stifle any type of creativity and any type of moving forward. These cell phones and smartphones and everything that everybody carries was not set up by regulation, was not set up by the government. It's allowed free enterprise to develop these compared to anything else that we have in the market today. The government didn't bring this. Private parties brought this. And if we try and stymie the internet, we're going to slow down all types of creativity and production across the globe.
And slow down commerce, too. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, right? There's already efforts to do this, right? Facebook, Google, sort of not a national identity, but it's a universal identity you can use all over the internet. There's benefit to it. Single sign-on's really handy. But the government could subpoena them and take any information they want. But I don't see a huge benefit to a national identity.
Because the criminals just won't use it, or they'll get round it somehow?
Yeah, I mean, it's as was said over there, you can impersonate a computer, you can impersonate another identity. All I have to do is get control of someone's computer, and I can take their identity. I mean, you have to store it as something. How do you prove that you're actually you? And it's a certificate, or it's some set of authentication tokens. Everything can be impersonated. It's digital. Like you're actually creating more problems by doing that. If something's intended to be trusted and it can be easily stolen, then you're looking at making it easier to impersonate somebody almost.
A one-stop shop for identity things.
Right.
I think just to as you mentioned, Sean, about the accountability, I think whether we like it or not, and interestingly, we are all actually in agreement with a lot of the points that we all have made, but the regulators, so far the regulators are of a different opinion. They are more, whatever we say, they're still going to go ahead and do something. And the challenge is because most of them, as someone pointed on the other side, don't necessarily have any technical background at all and don't understand it. They will do damage, and I think what we should do is a suggestion of maybe working together, which is interesting, but work together from both sides of the fence to work to something that benefits everyone. It's never really going to be in the future, in my opinion, with the way things are happening with with everyone's reliance on the cyber nation, cyber world, cyber internet, whatever you want to call it. It's never really going to be fully open in the long run. I think the best thing that we can do now maybe is work with everyone who is in the know and try to get the best compromise. Is my personal kind of take on how I see this happening in the next 10, 20 years.
Can I ask you about DNSSEC? Because as I understand it, that is a way that you can secure DNS against DNS poisoning. And I mean, is there a way to expand that, or to take that kind of principle and expand it to other elements, or is it? I mean, is DNSSEC a joke?
Joke.
It's a joke.
Now, okay, so when you talk about identities, another good example is Russia. Okay, in order to register a domain name in Russia, you have to present a passport or some kind of identification. So criminals all over Russia, and they're stealing passports. I mean, I've popped a few criminal servers that have dozens of passport copies, scans of the passport. So then they just use these random victims to register domains with, and now you're falsifying, you're stealing someone's identity. That's pretty funny, dude. Yeah, we know who you are. But that's another example, right? So just a few months ago, we had three the executive level of some ISPs, largest ISPs in the U.S. I sat down, and in 6 hours, I basically showed them how I could take, steal passports, customize them, and I created online bank accounts, overseas banks. In a matter of 6 hours, I took 5 identities, created my own passports, social security cards, everything that you would need to set up a bank account offshore. Online, like WebMoney, Liberty Reserve, several others that I won't mention, but yeah, I mean, I basically set it all up and was able to move thousands of dollars, just to show them that how easy and how possible it is using stolen identities. And it's putting my picture over top of some, and, had several nationalities. So, I mean, regulation of identities, it's impossible. I mean, I will say that. I mean, unless technology gets to a point where, you can do that. I mean, internet service providers would have to be, regulate that, but they can't. You can't. I mean, anyone can just plug into a Starbucks and just go and do. How do you control that? It's cost prohibitive. Ooh, that's a CISO word you guys like, cost prohibitive, right?
So is there? I mean, is there really nothing we can do to stop the growth of cybercrime?
Yeah.
This is why hackers are important. So right now when we hear the term hacker, it always means a bad thing. But I always differentiate between a hacker and an attacker. So a hacker is someone who has creativity and who's resourceful enough to actually make something out of what he's dealt with. Actually, the first hacker I knew is not human. He's an alien. His name is E.T. So from an umbrella and a simple toy, he was able to create something out of that, and he was able to communicate back home so his friends could come back for him. So the way hackers operate is that, like for us, we're given a set of technical rules. And we have a technical playground. It could be the internet or operating system or whatever. And based on what we have, we're able to try to discover new things and make something out of it that we want to do. And whatever we discover, we share it. The good thing about fellow hackers is that you share it within the community. So because of that sharing, the knowledge sharing, something good always come out of that. Now sometimes when we share it to people who has the power to actually do something about it, sometimes it gets unnoticed. But if the bad guys, the attackers, not the hackers, get a hold of it, surely they will use it for something really, really nasty. So the internet for me, it's like a continuous growth. So there will be technical problems along the way. Some of those technical problems, we would see it used in criminal activity, but there's always a technical solution for that. So whenever we hear a DNSSEC, it's a technical solution to a certain technical problem, but it will not solve all of the technical problems. It might solve a little bit, a new problem will come, and then it will call for another technical solution. So technical problems require technical solution and not regulation.
Okay, sorry. Hold on. I win. Okay. No. Okay. So when you have countries like Russia and China who pay or give privileges to hackers who steal information from the United States or competitive countries, and where law enforcement can be bought off. You know, actually, my next my talk I'm going to do at 4. I'm going to talk about 3 of the world's 20-year-old Russians who they were arrested and they paid off the Russian government, the FSB, to get them off their backs. And these guys are flaunting it, but they're being paid. So every country has an intelligence arm that will. Okay, great example. China, when I was in China in 2008, I was interviewing some hackers. Well, how do they get paid? They go steal information from competitive countries, they give it to the Chinese government, and the PLA will sit there and give, free college, or, give a nice home to their families. Or, hey, you want to go overseas? We'll take care of your family while you go to the university in the U.S. and steal information. It's not just a crime perspective. You have levels of government that are actually enabling and encouraging this. I mean, I was arrested by the FBI at 16 for hacking into 4 government agencies. What did I do when I got off of juvenile probation? The government hired me. Whoa. I mean, so there's incentives all around the world to, be a criminal, and how you use it or how you sell it.
The reality is there's no such thing as perfect security. There's no reducing risk to zero. Yeah, you can implement controls that reduce your risk, but it's never going to get to zero. So no matter what we do on the internet, whatever controls we put in, it's never going to be zero. Let me give you, for instance. It's rather easy to steal credit cards across the internet, right? Well, and what's the value of a credit card on the black market? $1 to $2. You want to know what's even easier? Is going into one of these banks as a database administrator and exporting the entire credit card database. That's easier. You have access, you're employed by the bank, you're trusted, and you can just export the entire database. And how many banks actually have appropriate controls around that? Not enough. Now, you make $100,000 a year as a database administrator. You work at a bank that controls 50 million credit cards. What's your payday? 50 million, $100 million? How many people who make $100,000 a year wouldn't want one criminal payday?
But it's a matter of incentives and disincentives, right? The chances of you getting caught by doing something like that would be rather high, wouldn't they? Or at least, too high for me, but I'm of a nervous disposition.
Just out of curiosity, if you could raise your hands and say you would know if a DBA exported data from your database. Raise your hand. Know for certain. Not a whole lot of hands go up.
Nobody's going to know for certain, I think. Here's 3 ideas for better security and better, some of the directions we need to go. Training defenders, training internal security folks to know when a breach is happening. It's just not happening today. People get hired for a pen test. They'll come in, they'll actually test your security, they give you a report, and they walk out the door. And you'll find some problems in that, and you'll probably fix those problems. But, the real benefit of doing that is the process, and actually, going through an attack and understanding what an attack looks like. So that's one idea, doing more actual active training. Better information sharing between attackers and defenders. The Metasploit project is a good example of this. This is, it's a good set of resources to look at that tell you what state of the art is, or at least close to state of the art is for an attack. And then to your point, does it need to be regulated, and are there any things we can do there? The international task forces between the FBI, the Dutch police, there's some good work going on with international task forces to track down criminals around the world. So 3 ideas: train your defenders, better information sharing between attackers and defenders, and promotion of an international task force to deal with issues after they've happened. One other point, there seems to be a push or a push for counterattack. If you have an attack happen on your infrastructure, should you be allowed to attack back?
We're going to come to that in a minute,
Cool.
So let me cut you off there. Chris.
I was about to add, a corporation is like a country. So when you're under attack, it's like war. So corporations right now, the way I see it, talking with different CISOs, is that during peacetime, they're really, really very good. When I say peacetime, that's the pre-attack and the post-attack. Pre-attack, they're very good. They have threat modeling. They have all of the solutions in place. They believe that their company is fortified. And the post-attack is that they have a team of incident response teams. They know how to clean up. They know how to identify whichever was compromised. So they're really good at that. But one thing they really need to improve on is when the attack is going on. It's like, how are they going to deal with that? 5, 10 years ago, attack would take place in 2 hours, and that's it. But right now, the threat is persistent. You're under attack constantly. Sometimes your company is under attack for weeks and you don't even know it. So you're good during peacetime, but during wartime, where the attack is going on, nobody in the enterprise really knows how to deal with it. Nobody knows how to detect a current attack that's going on. Nobody knows how to counterattack. Nobody knows how to stop an attack. So peacetime, they're good. Wartime, not so much.
Is that a fair comment, gentlemen? Are you guys great in the peace, but less good in war?
I think that's selectively true. There are certainly organizations that are lousy at knowing that they're under attack, and there are other organizations that do. I mean, the gentleman who was just speaking, I think, works for NetWitness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a network forensics product. It will give you alerts on certain activities that shouldn't be occurring on your network. Fair?
Yep.
Okay. So, you know, and there are other solutions, you know, guidance, cybersecurity, Damballa for botnet detection. I mean, these are some commercial products that are able to detect and alert on certain anomalous activities. But there are other companies that have, you know, firewalls, and they believe still, wrongly, that, you know, having firewall is sufficient. And they have no mechanism for detecting an ongoing intrusion. And we see that time and time again. It's in the newspapers, it's in the magazines. Someone's been owned for a year or 2 years. You know, when I was doing consulting, I went into places that would, you know, we did forensic investigation. We found that they had been hit, and it had been ongoing for years.
No, yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is a lot of times humans are in a state of denial, right? I mean, that's kind of the where, you know, you may be seeing an attack, but you're going to be, you know, you're innocent until proven guilty. Let's say it that way, right? So people don't want to jump to the conclusions that kind of, hey, you know, something is going on, right? So I think whether there are signs of things going on, and are you picking that signs, or are you in a state of denial? I mean, I think that's kind of where the human brain has to, you know, come over the fact and talk about it and realize it, right? So, I think there was a previous question about, is that the right thing from a hacking perspective? I mean, absolutely, right? There's ethical hacking, there's white hats, there's black hats, and then there's gray hats and everything else, right? So I think the key is to be able to say, you know, if we're doing it for the good cause, how can we combine it, right? How can we put it to good use, and how can you get the good responses? So is it about, are you able to react? You know, but that's the question is, you know, are you moving away from, moving beyond knowing that something is going on, right? So how quickly can you react also?
There's one other little detail that we're looking at that we need to fully understand. A lot of the other countries out there have also stated in their doctrine that if somebody is penetrating them, is hacking them, they consider that an act of war. That means that any company in the U.S. or South America or wherever decides to follow back one of the attackers back in, technically within the borders of China, China then sees that as an act of war from that government to start attacking them. And that's one thing that companies probably shouldn't get involved in, is acts of war with other countries.
That's only the stupid companies that don't know how to fire up a VPS on another turf and bounce it through a couple of them. I mean, And, you know, let's be honest, the state of the internet is such that if you want, so I've heard, because I don't do that sort of research, if you look at the links that you get in your spam and phishing emails that are in all of our spam buckets, and if you, so I've heard, were to take a close look at those compromised servers, you would find that the people that have compromised them have really bad operational security. There's so many compromisable hosts on the internet that it's not worth locking other bad guys out. You can find a myriad of machines that are already compromised, often with remote access tools exposed for the criminals to use to manage Viagra spam or whatever. I'm not advocating striking back, but if you're, you know, to be blunt, if you're dumb enough to attack back directly from where you're coming from, you're probably dumb enough to attack a company that's been compromised and not be able to trace it back in the right place. But one of the things that I think we've bounced around a couple of things, and we're not really getting to the point of a couple of things because they're a little more complicated than they look. So when we're talking about identity, we need to be able to identify who we are when I want to buy something from Amazon. I want that to be accurate, but that needs to be opt-in because I also need privacy. And when we try to put it in one bucket, we're conflating a problem of privacy and a problem of authorization and authentication. You know, we're mixing things up, and there's a lot of potential here. One of the problems in these attack scenarios, which we happen to have a fantastic prop in the audience here, is one of the problems, I think, with not understanding the nature of the attacks that we face is that we often make assumptions about who's going to attack us and what it is that they want. And if you think that because you process credit cards, that's what people are after, but the plans for your new product aren't really that valuable, and so you're defending your credit card database but not your intellectual property, you're going to end up on the Mandiant M-Trends report, or if you haven't seen them, Verizon split up. They sliced and diced the DBIR data by industry vertical. The one that was the most interesting to me was they sliced out the intellectual property. The intellectual property crimes turned out to line up with Mandiant's M-Trends, as you would expect, and those were the ones that had an average of 400 plus days from point of compromise to discovery because they didn't have a common point of reporting like you do with credit cards or other financial fraud. And then we have other threat actors who may want to do it for vengeance, or they may just want to burn all the things, and that's where anonymous or people under the anonymous banner or LulzSec come. And so we don't know what we're defending against. We can be attacked from anywhere on the planet, and the attack can be for a variety of motivations with a variety of targets. And if we think our threat modeling is complete because we're protecting credit card data, we're wrong.
Let me pick up on the point of that was made about cyber war. One of the things that you know, I think is very concerning is...
Sorry, I was just having a seizure over the use of the term cyber war.
Well, what I mean by that, I guess, is destructive actions in cyberspace carried out by a nation state.
You mean like...
I mean like Stuxnet.
You mean like smoke on the insulators of the power plant, the power transmission lines in Brazil, which are still used as an act of cyber war, even though we all know now, years later, that it had nothing to do with cybercrime? Now, Stuxnet is a different case. Flame is a different case. Some of the other things that are out there are different cases. But everything's not cyber war. And also, at a time when we have people in miserable places dying and killing as part of what they do, it frustrates me more than a little to hear military terminology bandied about when we're talking about attacks launched from somebody's basement or data centers. Yeah, there's the possibility for real destruction, and it's certainly real, but if you're going to launch cyber war, if you're going to cripple a part of the U.S. power grid, If you're going to hold that down, not a subtle DDoS, attribution is going to become simple. It's easy to make single strikes or to do DDoS through botnets, but if you're going to do true government level bad stuff, attribution is going to come up. And at some point in time, no matter who it is, that's going to come back with a kinetic response. And you'd be ready. The only way I see that it makes sense is if the missiles are launching, knock down the power grid. And that way, when they get the power grid back up, the missiles are already hitting. And I mean, that may be an extreme case of it, but I think that kind of scenario is the only true cyber war. Otherwise, we're talking about espionage, which is nothing new. We have to come up with new words for it, you know. Cyber used to mean something very different for those of us that have been on the internet for a while.
But I mean, let me press you on the attribution point a little bit. Do we know where Stuxnet came from? I mean, you know, there has been some reporting by the New York Times that suggest, you know, officials telling reporters that it was a U.S. Israeli
in an election year.
Sorry?
In an election year. Attribution in an election year is probably harder than attribution on the internet.
But technical
attribution. So on something like that, which was, you know, to me that was an intelligence operation. I don't call that war. I mean,
it was an act of sabotage.
It was an act. You're right, but that's. I mean, it's a classic intelligence operation. You know, that's happened for millennia, right? Somebody sneaks in and does something bad. In this case, somebody snuck in, but had Trojan horse. Yes, exactly. These are new techniques. These are new technologies used for old techniques. But if we're going to get into war, that's a different thing. As far as who did, if Stuxnet, you know, and it appears to have been targeting Iran. It's easy to assume that the U.S. and Israel are the most likely people, the most likely nation states. However, last time I checked, Iran has a whole bunch of enemies around the world, including in the Middle East. The Shia-Sunni rivalries are not over. There are people in Iraq, there are people in Turkey, there are people throughout the area. And yeah, there are bits of information that are required, but a lot of things that are supposedly require nation-state level skill levels, you know, a little Google or a little bit of internet history will show you they don't. I mean, some of the crimeware and other things that supposedly have to be nation-state level, I would invite anybody to dig back, if you had never used back orifice in the NT4 days from the Loft Heavy Industries. That was a piece of software, a software package, which was modular, scalable, distributed, and had a lot of things that I often, you know, we now see as being new and cutting edge. And it's like, no, that was a hacking crew out of MIT over a decade ago that did things that are supposedly new. So if we take the hype away from it, I think it's there. But as far as attribution for large-scale attacks that are going to make a substantial, you know, internation combat level thing, it's going to be hard not to know who it is. And if we apply logic to it, which is a dumb idea with war, I will admit, but when the bombs land, you're probably going to figure out where they came from. You know, there's going to be a little note attached, one way or another, I believe.
Yeah, so Clausewitz said that war is the continuation of politics by other means. I think that cyber attacks are the same way. This is just politics. Someone's playing politics. Now, people may get hurt. We may lose money over it. But it's, when you have state actors doing this, it's just a continuation of international politics. You know, lawfare exists. That's a new form of warfare where you use legal system against nation states. Israel's probably the primary recipient of lawfare attacks. The issue here is around cyber war is, do you have a casus belli if someone attacks you through cyber warfare? Under international law, there is none. There is no, you don't have the right to strike back militarily under international law because someone has struck you through the internet, as far as I understand. And I think that if you're going to go there, You need to
Actually,
change
I think the US
international...
government has said that
They
it would
believe
regard-
it, but there's been no judgment, there's been no cases, there's been no decision in the international legal community that's true, unfortunately. Maybe this is. I mean, hey, look, it's economic crime, at least, and it's state-sponsored economic crime.
I don't think there's a lot of argument that this sort of activity is increasing, right? If you look at Saudi Aramco and 3,000 computers basically taken offline by a presumably state actor, I think that's interesting. And definitely the activity is increasing. Stuxnet, Flame, Dooku. I think one of my biggest concerns around this is that that sort of software and that sort of technology is now being developed in private as opposed to in the public. And so we're learning from this as it comes out. We're going, oh, there's a nice ODE, we can use that. Or, like we should do something about this. This changed maybe a couple of years ago too with the Chinese. We're now picking up ODE from the Chinese and learning from them. I think that's a new development that wasn't happening 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Amal?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up that point as well, but, great points on the political manifestation and, cyber war, so to speak, but the political points and why we use it, or why others would use it. I'd say in theory, it's very similar to currency manipulation, things of that nature, but these things have ripple effects throughout the economies of the world. One of the points that I wanted to just bring to the table is, if there's a kinetic effect associated with the action, like you mentioned, sabotage, which is very different in my mind from espionage and intelligence gathering and things of that nature. If you actually take that role in shooting an ambassador of any country, that's usually an act of war. If an individual that is a citizen of one country lobs a small homemade nuke over the border, that's an act of war, right? Attribution is where did it geographically come from. Within the internet realm, that's a very complex issue to deal with or to grapple with, because the whole idea of a hacktivist, people within this room that all have different political beliefs. Everyone, just within our own country, here in the United States, everyone has different political beliefs. To further your agenda, what are you willing to do? Do you need to be anonymous in order to be able to act to be free? Do you need to be anonymous in any form? I don't believe you have to be anonymous to conduct commerce. I don't think you have to be anonymous to drive down the street. You're fingerprinted when you're born in any country. There's a degree of identity that goes through in geographically. If you take a flight from one country to another, you're going to go through an identity process. You're going to go through an identity process when you conduct any type of activity, including employment within our own companies. We require identity as CISOs for the people working for us to act on our network. Why then do you have to be anonymous? Why is that degree of privacy required to interact within the cyber realm? And then, yes, that would have an after effect of attribution. And I think we have to get to a point where we can do attribution, or else we will have a problem where nations will go to war at some point over cyber actions. So.
Yeah, we've got two.
I just, as a counter to that, I firmly believe that without anonymity, there is no free speech.
Amar, you
Plus one.
I just to further that, I can speak freely here, and I can speak freely everywhere. My name is Aaron Owens.
Can you?
So I do not need to be anonymous to be free. In some countries, yes, maybe you do need a degree of that. But you know what? If you're distributing kiddie porn, and if you're out there committing crimes and moving money, and you need to act anonymous to be able to do that in a criminal realm, that is required. You do need to steal a passport to create a domain name in Russia because you're committing a crime. But the rest of us don't. I can set up a domain name and I use my real name. Why? Because I don't need to be anonymous to be free. And I think that that's the key issue we have to that's open for discussion.
What if
is privacy.
So I totally disagree with you, but what if I release a vulnerability in your software application, because you're not fixing it, and, 3 years down the road, that's now a criminal action, and I did it publicly at the time.
I guess to counter that, I would say, if I could tell who you were, because you were willing to go ahead and say you have a vulnerability in the application because you work for a legitimate company, you have rules to follow, others do not, then you're going to publish that to get fame, correct? Because you want
to protect
you. Want
well, I
attribution.
mean, there's both sides, right? Like if there's a good process, I mean, this is the disclosure debate when it comes right down to it, right? But if for whatever reason you're not able to patch it in a timely manner and it's being exploited, and it's protecting your users to put that information out there. I mean, it doesn't have to be a vulnerability. It could be any kind of information.
Let me, because we've moved on now to these ethical questions, which I was going to leave till the end because I didn't want the fighting to break out too early. But let me ask you, Erin, how long should you wait? Right? If you're an independent security researcher and you come up with a vulnerability and you let the vendor know, how long should you wait?
A vulnerability means nothing. Zero. Only if someone exploits that vulnerability for malicious use does it actually have a problem. I can have every piece of software that's out there has vulnerabilities. Every firewall has vulnerabilities. Security is not inherent in the design. Like you mentioned, we want to be creative. We want to be free. You're never going to get security. Right? You're always going to have a vulnerability. It's only when somebody exploits that. I'm walking down the street, I feel fairly safe, but someone jumps out from behind a building and stabs me to take my wallet. He's exploiting the fact that I'm not paying attention. That's my vulnerability. The fact that I'm walking down the street does not make it a problem. That's part of freedom. I want to be able to walk down the street, and I don't have to hide when I do that. So.
Yeah, I can see your face. You're like, come sit with us, come sit with us.
But I think the challenge is, you're not wrong, a vulnerability, unless it's exploited, just remains a vulnerability. But I, as a buyer of a product from, the good old people who make these products, I'm sure it is their responsibility to take note of what is being told to them. Now, in my opinion, I give everyone the benefit of doubt. Folks on the side who do the hacking have good intentions. They want to understand the product. They discover an issue and they highlight it. If the vendor then sits on it for years, not doing anything, and I've paid him a lot of money. He's not running a charity. He's asking a lot of money for that product.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't patch it, and then some other folks or nation states then discover that vulnerability and then exploit it. Surely the vendor should be brought up to task.
I mean, Erin, it seems to me that you were saying basically, if you're in that situation, if you're a security researcher, you find a vulnerability, you should wait forever until it's exploited, right? I mean, there's no harm. You're saying you're waiting.
If you find a vulnerability, it's a matter of priority. I'll use an example of a medical device from a hospital. A medical device, what you're mentioning is absolutely correct. I'm paying a lot of money, and by the way, people's lives are at stake that system is functioning correctly. However, the medical devices on any public network, or we don't even connect them to our network, because they're built on old OSs. They're 100% vulnerable. Most of them aren't even supported anymore. So they're isolated from our other production domains.
Yeah.
The reason for that is that the medical vendors don't continue to update and patch those systems. Those are the most vulnerable systems on any hospital network. And that's the one that your life is dependent upon. No one's life is dependent upon that computer operating, right? However, that's fantastic. If we can get that thing patched, great, but is that a real priority? Only if someone exploits it or is willing to exploit it.
Okay.
That's when you really have a problem.
Christopher.
Yeah, actually, when you said that the vulnerability for you has zero value, that actually scares me. Because for one, you don't need to wait for someone to exploit that vulnerability to actually do something about it. It's like saying, okay, we won't have any fence to secure our home, but then if somebody comes in, kills someone you love, then that's the only time you would do something about it. That's scary, especially if somebody reported it, because it means that software or that device is publicly accessible. So if an independent researcher was able to find a vulnerability, it's always possible that the attackers already found them, and they're probably in the process of creating an exploit for that.
Okay, but let me just come back on that, because Erin made the point about medical devices, and I was here last year when there was a gentleman, Barnaby Jack, who showed how to hack an insulin pump. Yep. But that, and there are lots of vulnerabilities in these devices. As far as I'm aware, that's never been used, right, in the wild, as they say.
Yeah, that's why I was saying, if an independent researcher...
So doesn't he have a point? That's what I'm saying. Doesn't he have a... Because those vulnerabilities are out there now, right?
Yeah,
people know about them. They know how to do it. But no one has used that to try and, I guess, kill someone with an insulin overdose.
That's more of a target.
One of you will probably remember which one of the books from the Stealing the Network series involved killing somebody by exploiting medical records in a hospital. It was a work of fiction.
Swapping them out. Yeah.
It was a work of fiction over a decade ago. This is not a new idea, and what we've now found is that, as we would expect, the medical industry does not take the security seriously because they don't look at threat models. Now, they have a different set of priorities than we do, and so there are things that we battle as far as, like, why don't we make the ER doctor type in a 24-character password? I got a really good answer, even though I'm a security guy. However, remotely programmable, Barnaby Jack's latest, remotely programmable, not just pacemakers, but the ones that have defib functions. You can trigger that and fire 870 volts or so into somebody. The idea that would be done without, it doesn't have to be malicious, because in the world we live in, we are subject to so much continuous RF radiation of so many different forms, not just when we go through the airport and get our freedom fondle and walk past the radiation machines, but the idea that people would not secure something like that against interference that could trigger it, that needs to be locked down solidly.
I mean, that would be a safety issue rather than a security issue, but perhaps?
Let's look at this from a risk perspective. There are vulnerabilities and there are threats that exploit such vulnerabilities. If the threats don't exist, the vulnerability, it may exist, but there's no threat. And that's possible in certain situations. It's also possible that you've applied different controls that mitigate the risk of that vulnerability being exploited as well. Right. I mean, there are different ways of approaching it.
One of the things that I would point out, which is, if anybody's religious, you probably want to back away, because I'm going to say something good about reports from Symantec now. There was a recent report from Symantec where they studied 0 days. And what they did was they looked at binary analysis of files uploaded through one of their reporting mechanisms, and then they looked at detections for those files that were detected malicious. And what they found was a bunch of stuff within a sample set, so 11 out of 18, which is a large percentage in this sample set. Pieces of malware were actively exploited before anyone knew that it existed. So when that vulnerability was reported and disclosed, it had already been actively exploited in the wild, because the assumption that somebody else hasn't discovered it and attacking you and is attacking you with it is a flawed assumption. And if it's obvious enough that Symantec can spot it and prove it, it's got to be really obvious, I think.
Asians and Russians, I figured it out.
There's one other thing. I used to work for a couple of medical device companies in the past. With medical devices, yes, there's a potential vulnerability to the person, but this is an implanted device. And what's the threat to the life of the patient if you have to pull the device out to replace it? I know that you have to do that kind of math. there's a chance that you might kill the patient if you put them under and replace the...
Absolutely. And here's one of the things, and this is where the disclosure debate gets ugly and it gets dirty, and it's that the reaction of the company, the reaction of the organization is critical. So how long do you give a company? Well, if it was 12 or 14 years ago and the company was Microsoft, full disclosure, don't even give them an opportunity. You don't waste your time, don't let the lawyers come out after you. Today, at least those of us that work in the industry, I would assume are, unless we're in the business of finding bugs and selling them, I would expect that you would work with Microsoft because they're like a poster child for having seen the light on security. If you are a company that has a habit of suing people, it's going to be on pastebin. The medical equipment manufacturers, if one of them stepped up and said, hey, you know what, this is bad, this is not, we can't reflash them. This isn't a thumb driver. However, model number whatever going forward, we've worked with the researcher, we have identified ways to secure this, and anybody that gets the devices, and we've pulled old stock and re-updated the firmware, and moving forward, we're taking this seriously. Instead of saying, I don't think it's a problem. I mean, I come from the car business in a past life. The auto manufacturers still have yet to figure out that the high-speed bus and low-speed bus in your car should not be able to communicate, even though their own specs say they can. What does that mean for us? That means that your aftermarket radio can talk to your anti-lock brake system, engine management system, and transmission system. So, they're fundamental. It's not just medical, and there have been a few things with cars. Part of the problem with hacking cars is you have to buy them, and that gets expensive, especially when you start wadding them up and stuffing them into walls and stuff. So you're buying track time and things like that. But the reaction of the organizations, and, the history of Black Hat and DEF CON are littered, and even B-sides now are littered with companies that have reacted poorly.
So, I mean, what can CISOs do, what should they do to try and get their companies to take a better attitude towards the independent security researchers who are coming up with these vulnerabilities?
I think there should be some kind of a forum where I have no issues with talking to folks on the other side and listening to them. The challenge, I think the headache is that everyone's criminalized the whole activity of finding vulnerabilities and then maybe exploiting them afterwards. But the question I had with relating to this is, so what today, if you just do a simple defacement, is that a criminal offense anymore? Or should it be a criminal?
It's an offense under the Computer Fraud and Misuse
Exactly,
Act,
but I guess
unauthorized
the question is, I'm putting out a thought saying that's an activity that is so low down the food chain that is it really that important? Almost everyone's being defaced. It's almost a badge of honor maybe most organizations can wear. Hey, we got defaced, we learned our lessons, and we moved on, kind of thing. Or, But I guess what I'm trying to say is, why not work with them, as you rightly say, listen to them. If the vendors don't listen to them, where you've paid them all that money, at least there should be an avenue for them to talk directly to the folks who use them.
To the users.
To the end users.
Right. I mean, so let me ask you this.
Could I just have one more point?
Eric, please.
I mean, the fact is these guys work for us. I mean, we hire these guys on this side. I mean, let's just be clear. If we didn't think it was important, you guys wouldn't have a job, right? So we hire...
And we would do it as hobbies, which we used to do and may even still do in our spare time.
And then you'd have the FBI picking
and
up
the
when you're
companies that
16.
hire us get treated differently than the companies that pretend that it's not important.
Very good, but it's a clear point, it's a clear distinction. We're not really having a hacker versus CISO debate here. We're both on the same side of the fence. We both want to fix the problem, right? We just simply, these guys, we need them. They're a critical part for us to assess the risk to our infrastructure. They help us with priorities. But we have to go back to an executive team and compromise for actually every company that goes into business with a set of risk. It takes risk to operate. It takes risk to invest. It takes risk to go out and actually create an operation or a hospital and serve patients or a financial institution. There's risk. That's all inherent within the system. So we're never going to get to a state of perfection, but we're always going to have to work toward priorities. And we do make compromises, and we have to make those on a daily basis, but it's important. And I guarantee if I went to any one of your houses, none of you have gun turrets on the top. None of you have gated systems. You're vulnerable. We're all vulnerable in every wake of life. The point being, your networks could be hacked as well at your own home, and you know it.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that is true that you've touched on that's worth reiterating, that often those who are more tactical, rather than management level, those that traditionally would be on this end of the table, do lose sight of that risk thing. And here's an interesting conversation to have if you haven't ever had that. Try to explain to somebody who's an entrepreneur why he shouldn't take risks or why she shouldn't take risks. Wait, that's what entrepreneurs do, right? In many cases, serial entrepreneurs have built up more money and are investing more money and gambling more money than the high rollers in Vegas. And so if you want to talk about risk, you have to talk about risk in a logical way, and you have to, put it out there. And that's one of the things that that we tend to get really wound up about vulnerabilities without doing. But that's not a new issue. Marcus Ranum famously said years ago, if you're spending $2 to protect something worth $1, you're doing it wrong. And that's something that we do tend to get worked up over. And it's there. And as long as I'm throwing a bone too, I will admit there are people on our side, even work in this business, who are jerks about vulnerability disclosure. If you go to Black Hat, you'll find people who drop 0-day on companies based on having had blog comment wars with them, and which is not especially, but it depends on how that's done. But it's not that simple.
But let me pick up on if I can just, because we're going to wrap up in a few minutes, and there is just one more thing I want to get to. This is this process of communication, right? That how do you talk to the board about these issues? And Karthik, you and I talked about this earlier. Because do you guys make presentations to C-level executives?
Yeah.
And do you feel like they're listening? Do you feel like they get it?
Yeah, like for me, every time I talk to a C-level executive, I talk to him in terms of money. Like if you don't do this, this will cost you this amount of dollars. Now, the lower I go into the chain, the more technical I get when I talk to them about technical problems. But with C-level executives, I always talk in terms of money. Like if you don't spend $100,000 to protect this critical system or this system that's hosting this much data, if it gets compromised, the effect it will have on your company could probably be $1 million of lost productivity, reparation, and also how to make sure those data doesn't get into the wrong hands.
Sure.
Yeah, this is a risk discussion with C-level executives. The head of sales, you tell them, if this risk eventuates and we've lost all of our data, you're going to have a tough time selling. And guess what? Sales executives, if they can't sell anything, they're not making their incentive pay, they're not happy, they leave the company. You talk to the person in charge of customer support. If we get breached, your phone lines are going to be inundated with breach issues, not support issues for how you use the product. The CFO, you explain to them, this is the annual loss expectation. If this breach occurs, this is how much it's going to cost the company. You have a special way of discussing it with each individual C-level executive, and then you talk to the risk committee and of the board of directors, and it's clearly dollars and cents and where their investment is going to go. It's going to go right down the tubes.
It's a good point. One of the problems with that for us is that a lot of what we're dealing with is extremely fluid, and I believe that when you're dealing with people who truly understand risk and probability, which, let's be honest, isn't as many business people as we would like. It's not just us, it's not just tactical people. But you have to be honest about it. But when you're honest about it, you can say, well, I can't put a dollar value on brand damage because look at TJX, their stock has rebounded, but they're a discount retailer, so I don't know. And so if this happened, maybe that, and we'd have to figure in if we have customers in Massachusetts, we have a really miserable attorney general who's looking to kill somebody on 93H and 201 CMR 17, and if we're the test case there for a minor problem, that could cost us millions, or it could be $5,000. And there's some huge variables, and I think one of the things that we have to avoid, and that's both sides of the table, is putting a number down when we don't have one. Our best guess is this, based on this and this, based on this. And if you're talking to somebody who understands risk, if you're talking to somebody that is familiar with Bayes, right, which narrows it down even farther, but it's based on what we know, we think this is where we are. But that's really hard when somebody's trying to make a decision and that doesn't fit in one cell of an Excel spreadsheet.
I mean, a lot of times you're trying to make a decision with the information that you have in front. You're never going to have all pieces of information as an executive to make the decision as well at the C-level, right? So I think the key is to be able to translate the applicability of the risk, of the vulnerability that we identify, to be able to say how and when and what they can do to be able to act, right? So I think it's the translation from the actual technical risk element to a business risk element, either that's quantified or qualified, a qualitative analysis. I think the key is to be able to translate it. So.
Okay, I very briefly, because I saw that there were a couple of people out here who had their hands up earlier. Curtis, is there a microphone?
Really easy question, because it's going to take the guy in the bow tie to ask the dumbest question on earth. But I talk to Congress, I talk to boards of directors. They have a question to me, I don't know how to answer it. 42. So the question is, we've been talking about the internet and how to censor it, how to protect it, how to attack it. Can anybody agree on what the internet is? Can we agree on what it isn't? What are the boundaries? So when I have somebody look at me and say, so what is the whole internet? What is it? Are we talking about an abstract concept?
Wow. Anyone care to?
Yes. So I'll tell you what the problem is first. To most people, the internet is the World Wide Web, and they're wrong. All right, there's a lot more to it. There are a lot of protocols flying across the internet which are not the web. Email, since a lot of people think of email as being Gmail, they think mail is that way, but that's not part of that. It is a global network of interconnected systems, and it is, part of the problem is it is dynamic. The nature of the internet is fluid because of nodes coming and going, peering relationships being established and torn down, but also the ability to push compute into internet-hosted and scalable systems, right? We've heard cloud enough in the past couple of days, but cyber cloud. No, get out your buzzword bingo cards. But it is a global interconnected network. You can do things on there it's not designed to do. It's a connected system. If you can figure a way to signal on it, it's a signaling system. That signal can be extremely complex or it can be extremely simple, but it is a global mesh that is self-healing, self-correcting, but it is a global network. And I think signaling system really boils it down. And those, like I said, those signals can be as simple as a 1 and a 0, exactly. And when you boil them down, they probably are. They're a pulse or something. It can be what we see as the web, and that's what most people think of. But there are a lot of things that never appear in a browser that are critical parts of the internet. And that's what people don't understand. They don't understand how much management traffic there is just between routers, BGP and other protocols that are continuously communicating so that you can get to Facebook. So is there a clean definition? I'm sure somebody's got a cleaner definition than that, but to me, it is, a global internetwork mesh and signaling system.
I think that's the IEEE answer.
Yeah, we can.
Over here, I mean, our perspective, companies see the internet as a tool. I mean, it's a productivity tool, it's a communications tool, it's a way to replicate data from site A to site B so I can protect the company if something happens at site A. It's a way for me to communicate with my business associates, my vendors. It's a way for me to set up an EDI commerce connectivity into their SAP system so that I can pay their people faster. It's a tool. It's a productivity tool to speed the efficiency of a company and to lower the financial impact of doing business in this country. I mean, that's what it is to a company. And when there's commerce, you have to protect that commerce, right? That's a duty, so to speak, of the government. You ask the government perspective. If we created a Navy specifically because of what was happening in the Barbary Coast. We had ships that were being attacked by pirates. I see some pirate masks in the audience. I mean, they're pirates attacking a company. They're hurting the reputation.
Why do we care?
For whatever reason.
Why do we need to define this?
It is commerce, and it needs to be protected. And that's what's important to a company. We don't want to be on the front line. We weren't, I don't know about you, but I was not asked or drafted into the military to be on the front line of this so-called cyber war, so to speak. But we're being bombarded daily anyway. We'd like to have a productivity tool, and what we have is a risk to a degree. But it still works for us.
So I can describe the internet as a tool for commerce, and that's what it is?
No. That's a hard question.
I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to continue this offline. I know most of the speakers are going to be around. Sean's got to dash off to his presentation now. I think that was a great debate. I found it very informative. Could we have a round of applause, please, for our panel? And thank you all very much.
Thank you for the oddball question and the guy in the bow tie.